People laughed the day Emily Carter put a shovel into the frozen hillside. Men slowed their horses to stare. Someone joked that she was digging her own grave. Another said even the chickens she dreamed about would freeze before winter was done. Emily heard all of it. She kept digging anyway, because laughter didn't scare her nearly as much as the thought of her daughter not surviving the cold. The winter of 1802 had arrived at the worst moment of her life. Her husband, Daniel, had died only weeks earlier after a fever burned through him fast and merciless. One day he was splitting wood, the next he was gone. Emily was left with 8-year-old Lucy, a small purse of coins, and a piece of land on a hill outside the Millbrook settlement in the Ohio Territory. The cabin they had shared no longer belonged to her. Daniel's brothers made that clear without kindness. A widow and a child were not their problem. If you're watching this, subscribe and let me know where you're watching from. This story gets much more intense, and I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Emily sat on the rough wooden step one cold afternoon, watching Lucy push a broken toy horse through the dirt. The air carried that sharp warning that snow was close. She counted her choices like bruises. She could walk back east to her parents and live as a burden. She could marry quickly, quietly, to some man who needed hands more than love. Or she could try something no woman around Millbrook had ever done alone. "Lucy," Emily said, steadying her voice. "Come here, sweetheart." Lucy ran to her, cheeks red, braids slipping loose. "What is it, Mama?" "We're going to build our own place," Emily said. "On the hill. Just you and me." Lucy blinked. "Without Uncle Mark and Uncle Henry?" "Without them." Lucy hesitated. "Mama, ladies don't build houses." Emily brushed her daughter's hair back gently. "This one will." The next morning she said it out loud at the trading post, and the room exploded with laughter. Tom Harris, the biggest carpenter in the settlement, nearly choked on his cider. "A woman building a house," he said. "What's next, Emily?" "You shoe horses too." "It'll fall on their heads before she gets a roof up," someone added. A woman from the corner shook her head. "You should find a husband. That's how things work." Emily didn't raise her voice. She didn't smile either. "I want lumber and stone. I'll pay what I can now. The rest, I'll work off later." The laughter faded into murmurs. Curiosity replaced mockery. Tom scratched his beard. "Fine. I'll sell. But when it collapses, don't blame us." Emily placed every last coin she owned on the counter. "Deal." They began the next day. The hillside land had once been pasture, now swallowed by brush and young trees. Emily borrowed a dull axe and a rusted blade and went at it. Her hands split within the first hour. She tore strips from her skirt and wrapped them tight. Lucy dragged branches away, jaw clenched, determined not to quit first. By nightfall, Emily's body felt broken in places she didn't know existed. But she couldn't stop. Winter wasn't waiting for her to be ready. "Why are we digging into the hill?" Lucy asked one afternoon, boots soaked, hands muddy. Emily paused, leaning on the shovel. "Because the earth helps us," she said. "It holds warmth. It protects. We don't have strength like men do, so we have to think." Lucy considered that. "So we're being smart." Emily smiled. "Exactly." They dug until their arms shook. Rocks fought back. Clay resisted every inch. Settlers shouted jokes from the road. Emily answered none of them. Every laugh pushed her deeper into the ground. After 2 weeks, a wide cut opened into the hill, deep enough to promise shelter if she could finish in time. One evening, Emily collapsed beside the hole, breath ragged, hands bleeding again. Doubt crept in quietly. Maybe they were right. Maybe pride would kill her child. Lucy sat beside her and slipped her small hand into Emily's. "Get up, Mama," she said softly. "We can do it together." Emily looked at her daughter and understood something that wouldn't leave her again. Quitting would teach Lucy more than failure ever could. So she stood up. And the digging continued. Emily woke before dawn most mornings, her body stiff and aching as if the cold had settled inside her bones. Some days she lay still for a few seconds, listening to Lucy's breathing beside her under the thin blankets, and wondered if stubbornness was the same thing as courage. The wind pressed against their temporary shelter, making the canvas snap and tremble. Frost clung to the inside like a warning. Emily reached out and touched Lucy's cheek every morning just to be sure it was still warm. They ate little. Bread cut thinner each day. Sometimes just boiled roots and a bit of salt. Emily always pushed the larger piece toward Lucy without comment. Hunger made her dizzy at times, but she ignored it. Hunger could be argued with. Winter could not. When the digging was done, the real fear began. A hole in the hill was not a home. Not yet. Emily stood inside the cut earth one quiet morning, staring at the rough walls, trying to imagine safety where there was only dirt and shadow. Her hands shook, and not only from cold. She had watched men build cabins her whole life. She had never been allowed to help. Watching was all women were expected to do. Now watching wasn't enough. "We start with the bottom," she told Lucy, forcing confidence into her voice. "If the ground isn't right, nothing else will be." She spent 3 days laying stone. Every rock was tested, shifted, lifted again. She tied a string to a small stone and used it to check if things were straight. Lucy crouched beside her, silent, observant, handing tools before Emily asked. When Emily mixed the mortar, her arms burned so badly she had to stop and breathe through the pain. "What's it supposed to feel like?" Lucy asked, watching the gray mixture. "Like thick mud that doesn't want to run away," Emily said. "Too wet and it won't hold. Too dry and it won't last." Lucy nodded as if storing the knowledge somewhere important. The first log nearly ended everything. It was heavier than Emily expected, smooth and straight and cruel in its weight. She tried lifting it alone, pressing her shoulder under it, teeth clenched so hard her jaw ached. The log didn't move. She pushed again, harder, until her legs gave out and she fell backward into the mud. For a moment, she didn't get up. The sky above her was dull and gray, and tears came before she could stop them. Not loud ones. Quiet ones. The kind that slipped out when no one was looking. "I can't do this," she whispered, not sure if she meant the log or the life. "I'm going to fail you." Lucy appeared above her, eyes wide with fear. "Mama." Emily wiped her face quickly. "I'm all right." Lucy shook her head. "You're tired." Emily laughed once, short and bitter. "That's one word for it." Lucy sat beside her in the mud, without caring about the mess. "You always say we don't quit when things are hard." Emily closed her eyes. Hearing her own words spoken back to her hurt more than the fall. "We'll think," Emily said finally. "We'll think our way through." They used a long beam and a rock. Inch by inch, breath by breath. It took nearly an hour to move that single log. When it finally settled into place, Emily sat back and laughed until it turned into sobbing. Lucy wrapped her arms around her neck, both of them muddy, shaking, and alive. From there, the walls rose slowly. Logs. Mortar. Straw mixed in for warmth, an idea Lucy suggested after watching birds build nests. Emily kissed the top of her head without thinking. The walls took on a strange beauty, dark wood and pale mortar layered like quiet stripes. People slowed as they passed. Some no longer laughed. Some watched without speaking. One woman stopped and said softly, "It's kind of lovely." Emily didn't answer. Praise felt dangerous. Like something that could disappear if she reached for it. Snow came early. Nights grew cruel. They slept curled together, waking stiff and shivering. Emily questioned herself every night. Was this bravery, or pride dressed up nicely? Was she protecting her child, or risking her life? Each morning, Lucy stood up anyway, pulled on frozen boots, and said, "What's first today, Mama?" And each morning, Emily followed her into the cold, because love left her no other choice. By the time December folded into January, the hill no longer looked like a joke. The walls stood firm against the earth, curved and stubborn, holding their shape even as snow piled against them. Emily noticed it first in the way people slowed without laughing now. Then in the way they pretended not to stare, as if curiosity embarrassed them. Cold became a living thing. It crept into Emily's joints, settled in her shoulders, made her hands ache before she even touched a tool. Some mornings she struggled to close her fingers around the handle of the shovel. Lucy noticed everything. "You should rest today," Lucy said once, her voice careful, like she was afraid of saying the wrong thing. Emily shook her head. "If we stop, the cold wins." That was the truth she lived by. Stopping meant thinking too much. Thinking led to fear. Fear wasted time they didn't have. The roof haunted her thoughts. Walls were one thing. A roof that could hold snow without crushing them was another. She lay awake at night, listening to the wind claw at the canvas shelter, watching Lucy sleep with her mouth slightly open, and tried to picture solutions. Straight beams were too heavy. Flat boards would collapse. She needed something that bent instead of broke. The answer came one afternoon while she watched tree branches sway violently in the wind and still survive. "They move," she murmured. Lucy looked up. "What does?" "The trees," Emily said. "They don't fight the wind. They let it pass." Building the roof took weeks. Emily soaked young saplings in the creek, weighed them down with stones, checked them daily. Some cracked when she tried to bend them. Others bent too far and weakened. Each failure felt personal. Each success felt borrowed. They worked by moonlight when daylight ran out too soon. Lucy held lanterns. Emily's fingers bled again, this time from splitting boards and tying joints tight. Pain became familiar, almost expected. "It smells like the earth," Lucy said once as Emily layered soil and grass over the curved frame. "That's the point," Emily said. "The earth keeps its promises." The first heavy snowfall came before the roof was finished. Snow piled on the exposed structure, testing it. Emily stood outside in the dark, heart pounding, waiting for the sound of collapse. It didn't come. The roof bent slightly, then held. Emily sank to her knees in the snow and pressed her forehead into her gloves, breathing out a prayer she didn't know she believed in. Food began appearing quietly after that. A loaf of bread left on a stone. A wedge of cheese wrapped in cloth. Once, a jar of preserves. Emily never saw who brought them. She didn't ask. Pride still burned in her chest, but pride didn't keep Lucy warm. One morning, she found a folded note weighted with a rock. The handwriting shook. "Keep going." Emily kept it in her pocket after that. She touched it on hard days like a charm. The door came next. Emily traded her last 2 chickens for iron hinges. Cutting the boards straight took longer than she planned. Hanging the door nearly broke her back. When it finally swung closed for the first time, sealing out the wind, Emily pressed her hand flat against it and laughed quietly. Inside, the space felt small but alive. Safe. The stove was the final gamble. She spent her last coins on the metal pipe, knowing there would be nothing left if she was wrong. When she lit the first fire and smoke rose cleanly through the roof, Lucy clapped like it was a miracle. "It's warm," Lucy whispered, eyes wide. Emily pulled her close, her throat tight. "We're not running anymore." They slept inside that night, curled together on the earth floor. The wind howled. Snow fell. The house held. Outside, the settlement watched the chimney smoke rise and said nothing. The first morning inside the house, Emily woke in confusion. For a moment, she didn't recognize the silence. No canvas snapping. No wind biting her face. Just a low, steady warmth and the faint crackle of dying embers. She sat up slowly, afraid the feeling would vanish if she moved too fast. Lucy was still asleep, curled tight like a kitten, cheeks pink instead of pale. Emily reached out and touched her forehead. Warm. Really warm. Her chest tightened so suddenly she had to press a hand over her mouth to keep from making a sound. She hadn't realized how afraid she'd been until that fear finally loosened its grip. They ate their breakfast sitting on the packed earth floor, backs against the curved wall. It wasn't much, bread and a little cheese, but it tasted different inside real shelter. Like food was supposed to taste. "We did it," Lucy said softly, almost like she was afraid the house might hear her and change its mind. Emily nodded. "We did." The work didn't stop just because they were inside. Now came the details that turned shelter into a home. Emily built a low bed from scrap wood, sanding rough edges until her hands burned again. She stuffed cracks with clay and moss, pushing it in with numb fingers. Every small improvement felt like an argument against the world that had doubted her. Lucy followed her everywhere, asking questions, copying movements. When Emily carved a bench, Lucy held the wood steady. When Emily mixed clay, Lucy stomped it with bare feet, laughing until Emily laughed too. That sound surprised them both. Laughter had been rare lately. Some nights, when the fire burned low and shadows stretched along the curved walls, doubt crept back in. Emily stared into the flames and thought of Daniel. She wondered what he would have said if he'd seen this strange little house buried in the hill. "You would have laughed first," she whispered once. "And then you would have helped." Lucy heard her. "Papa would be proud," she said without hesitation. Emily swallowed hard. "I hope so." The chicken shelter came next. Emily built it smaller, but with the same care. Digging hurt less now, not because it was easier, but because she knew why she was doing it. Lucy helped measure, helped mix, helped carry. When Emily carved a small heart above the entrance, Lucy touched it gently. "Why a heart?" she asked. Emily shrugged. "Because even useful things deserve kindness." When the chickens arrived, Lucy treated them like guests. She named them. She worried about them. She checked on them before checking on herself. "They won't freeze, right?" Lucy asked one night, lying stiff beside Emily. Emily pulled her closer. "They'll be warmer than we were." Snow fell heavier as February deepened. Some nights the wind roared so loudly Emily lay awake, counting breaths, waiting for a sound that meant failure. The house creaked but held. The roof bent and settled. The earth pressed close, protective and steady. People began to visit, quietly at first. They didn't mock anymore. They asked questions. They stood inside the doorway and looked around like they were stepping into something that wasn't supposed to exist. Tom Harris came one afternoon, hat in his hands. "I didn't think it would stand," he admitted. Emily met his eyes. "I did." He nodded slowly. "If you ever want work, you've got it." She didn't answer right away. For the first time in months, she didn't feel desperate. By early spring, eggs appeared in the straw nests. Lucy ran inside holding them like treasure, laughing so hard she nearly dropped them. Emily watched her and felt something unfamiliar bloom in her chest. Not relief. Not pride. Hope. The house wasn't perfect. The walls curved unevenly. The floor was dirt. But it was theirs. Built by hands that refused to accept the limits placed on them. One evening, as the sun dipped low and smoke curled gently from the chimney, Lucy leaned against Emily and said, "Mama, we're builders, aren't we?" Emily looked at the hill, the house, the child beside her, and understood the lesson hidden inside every aching muscle. "Yes," she said quietly. "And no one gets to tell us what we can't build." Spring didn't arrive all at once. It crept in slowly, like it wasn't sure it was welcome. Snow softened into slush. The ground turned dark and wet. Emily's hands stayed cracked and swollen, but the pain felt different now. It no longer came from fear. It came from building something that was still alive. With the thaw came exhaustion she could no longer ignore. Some mornings she sat on the edge of the bed and felt too heavy to stand. Her body had been running on need for months, and now it asked for payment. Lucy noticed the pauses, the way Emily held her side when she thought no one was watching. "You don't have to do everything today," Lucy said one morning. carefully handing her a cup of warm water. Emily smiled, tired and real. "I know. I just forget sometimes." That was the truth. She had been living like stopping meant dying. Learning to slow down felt almost dangerous. They planted the garden behind the chicken shelter once the ground allowed it. Emily showed Lucy how to press seeds into the soil gently, like secrets. They knelt side by side in the dirt, knees aching, hands muddy. "Will they really grow?" Lucy asked. "They want to," Emily said. "Most things do." People passed more often now. Some waved. Some stopped to talk. A few women lingered longer than necessary, eyes scanning the walls, the roof, the strange shape of the house. One young woman asked quietly, "Did you really do this by yourself?" Emily corrected her gently. "Not by myself." At night, when the house was quiet, grief returned in softer ways. Emily missed Daniel in the small moments. When something went right. When Lucy said something clever. When the fire burned just the way he used to like it. Grief wasn't sharp anymore. It was dull and heavy, like a stone carried everywhere. One evening, Lucy asked the question Emily had been avoiding. "Are you lonely, Mama?" Emily froze. Then she sat beside her daughter and told the truth. "Sometimes." Lucy thought about that. "I'm glad you're my mama." Emily laughed through tears. "I'm glad you're my girl." Old Mrs. Whitaker finally came in person one afternoon, leaning on her cane, eyes sharp despite her age. She walked slowly through the house, touching the walls, the bench, the stove. "I said foolish things," she admitted. "I was wrong." Emily nodded. "Most people are afraid of what they don't understand." Mrs. Whitaker smiled thinly. "You didn't just build a house. You changed a story." That stayed with Emily longer than she expected. By late spring, the garden showed green. The chickens laid steadily. Lucy grew taller, stronger, louder. She talked about building things when she grew up. Real things. Useful things. One afternoon, Emily sat alone on the step, watching the hill breathe with new life. For the first time since Daniel died, she let herself imagine a future that wasn't shaped entirely by survival. Not easy. Not perfect. But possible. She understood then that the house wasn't the bravest thing she had built. Staying. Teaching. Letting her daughter see her struggle and still move forward. That was the real work. And it was far from finished. Summer brought heat, and with it, visitors. Not crowds, not yet, just enough people to make Emily aware that her life was no longer invisible. They came in small pairs or alone, pretending to have reasons. A broken latch. A curiosity about the garden. Questions about chickens. Questions that weren't really about chickens at all. Emily answered what she could and deflected the rest. She had learned that attention could be as tiring as loneliness. One afternoon, a young widow named Hannah stood awkwardly near the doorway, twisting her apron. She stared at the curved wall like it might move if she looked too long. "I heard you didn't wait for anyone," Hannah said finally. Emily set down the bucket she was carrying. "I waited long enough." Hannah swallowed. "I don't know how to do anything like this." Emily studied her for a moment, then held out a hand. "I didn't either. Come see." That was how it started. Not with lessons or speeches, but with hands in dirt and shared silence. Emily showed her how to mix clay, how to feel when it was right. Lucy watched closely, proud in a way that made Emily's chest ache. Soon, others came. Quietly. Carefully. Women who asked questions in half-voices, like they were afraid someone might hear them wanting more than they'd been given. Emily never told them what to do. She showed them what could be done. At night, when the house cooled and cicadas hummed outside, doubt still visited. Not about the house, but about herself. Emily wondered if she was stepping into something she didn't know how to carry. Change had weight. Expectations were heavy. Lucy noticed when Emily grew quiet. "You're thinking again," she said one evening. Emily smiled faintly. You sound like your father. Lucy beamed. He was smart. Yes, Emily said. He was. They sat together on the step as the sun sank low, watching smoke rise gently into the evening sky. Emily thought of the woman she had been months ago, frightened, desperate, furious at the world. She hadn't disappeared. She had just learned how to stand. One day, a man passing through pointed at the house and asked, "Who built that?" Lucy answered before Emily could. "My mama did." The man laughed once, then stopped when he saw Emily's face. He nodded slowly instead. "Well," he said, "it's still standing." Emily met his gaze. "So are we." That night, she lay awake listening to Lucy breathe and realized something simple and powerful. The world hadn't changed. People still doubted, still judged, still tried to fit women into smaller shapes. But Lucy would grow up knowing that those shapes could be broken. And that, Emily knew, might be the strongest thing she ever built. Autumn returned quietly, almost politely, as if it remembered how hard the last winter had been. The air cooled without cruelty this time. Leaves turned before anyone felt afraid. Emily noticed the change in herself before she noticed it in the trees. She no longer woke with panic in her chest. She still rose early, still worked until her muscles burned, but the fear that once drove her had softened into something steadier. Lucy had changed too. She moved with confidence now, asked sharper questions, argued when she thought she was right. Emily sometimes caught herself watching her daughter and wondering when the little girl who dragged branches across frozen ground had turned into someone so sure of her hands. One afternoon, Lucy came home quiet. Too quiet. Emily noticed immediately. What happened? Lucy hesitated, then said, "Some boys in town said girls don't build things. They said I was lying." Emily felt the old anger rise, hot and fast. She forced it down and sat beside her daughter. "What did you say?" Lucy shrugged. "I didn't say anything." Emily nodded slowly. "That's all right." Lucy frowned. "But they were wrong." "Yes," Emily said. "They were." Lucy looked up. "Should I have told them?" Emily thought carefully. "You don't have to convince anyone who doesn't want to see. Truth has a way of standing on its own." Lucy smiled at that, small but satisfied. That evening, Emily fixed a loose board on the chicken shelter while Lucy held the lantern. The light flickered across the curved walls, the garden now brown and resting, the house steady and familiar. Emily realized how much of herself lived inside those shapes. Every doubt, every choice, every night she had wanted to quit and hadn't. People still came for advice. Not as many as in summer, but enough. Some asked about building. Others asked questions that had nothing to do with wood or earth. "How did you keep going?" one woman asked quietly. Emily answered honestly. "I didn't always feel strong. I just didn't stop." Winter threatened again as November settled in. The first snow came gentle, testing. Emily watched the roof carefully, listened to the sounds the house made. It held. It always held. On the first truly cold night, Emily woke suddenly and sat upright, heart racing. The house was silent. Too silent. She reached for Lucy. Warm. Emily exhaled slowly, deeply, and lay back down. For the first time since Daniel's death, she slept through the night without dreaming of loss. In the morning, Lucy practiced her letters at the small table Emily had built. Her tongue poked out in concentration. "Read this," Lucy said proudly. Emily leaned over and read the uneven words aloud. She felt something inside her chest loosen again. Later that day, a traveler stopped near the road and pointed toward the hill. "I heard a story," he said, "about a woman who built a house when no one believed she could." Emily wiped her hands on her apron. "Stories grow when they walk," she said. He smiled. "Some of them deserve to." That night, as snow fell softly against the roof, Emily understood something she hadn't planned for. What she built had never really been about shelter. Shelter was just the beginning. She had built proof. Proof for Lucy. Proof for herself. Proof that limits could be questioned without asking permission. And the winter, when it came again, found them ready. Years passed, and the house settled deeper into the hill, as if it belonged there from the beginning. Grass grew thick over the roof. The walls weathered but never failed. People stopped calling it strange. They started calling it smart. Lucy grew into herself the way the house had, quietly, firmly. She learned to read well, then to write better. Emily made sure of it, even when neighbors raised eyebrows. On winter evenings, Lucy sat at the table scratching words onto bark while the fire glowed steady and warm. Emily watched her and thought about how close everything had once come to breaking. Visitors still came. Some just to see the house. Others to see Emily. Widows. Young girls. Women carrying questions they had never said out loud before. "Can you really do it alone?" they asked. Emily always answered the same way. "No. You do it step by step. And you don't quit." One autumn afternoon, Lucy stood at the doorway watching the road. "They're still talking about you," she said, smiling. Emily chuckled. "Let them. What if they laugh again?" Emily rested a hand on the wall beside her. "Then the house will still be standing." That was the lesson Emily had learned too late to teach herself earlier, but just in time to pass on. The world didn't stop doubting. Cold still came. Loss still found its way into people's lives. But strength wasn't about being untouched by hardship. It was about deciding what you did after it arrived. The day Emily realized this fully was quiet and ordinary. She was fixing a hinge, Lucy beside her, when she understood that survival had changed into something else. Purpose. She hadn't built the house to prove anyone wrong. She had built it because love demanded action. Because fear didn't get the final word. Because sometimes the only way forward was through work that hurt and hope that felt foolish. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the hill, Lucy took Emily's hand. "Mama," she said, "if I ever feel small, I'll remember this place." Emily squeezed her hand. Then it did its job. The winters kept coming. The house kept holding. And when people told the story, about the woman who dug into frozen ground while the town laughed, they always ended it the same way. They said the cold came hard that year. Chickens froze. Houses failed. But one small home in the hill stayed warm. Not because it was perfect. Because someone refused to give up. And that, quietly and without shouting, became the truth that lasted.